In today's video, we're going to continue our series doing a prospect report here on all 31 NHL teams, taking an in-depth look at all their current top prospects, as well as summarizing their 2018 draft selections. Today's team we're discussing is the Edmonton Oilers, and that's coming up next. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. If you're new to the channel, thanks for stopping by. We review and discuss all 31 NHL teams, so if you're a huge hockey fan, consider subscribing and clicking the bell so you don't miss anything. So as I mentioned, we're going to continue doing our prospect report video series here where we look at all the top prospects for all 31 teams, kind of see what they have coming down the pipe and how much optimism each team here should have moving forward. A lot of teams have some really good prospect pools, so I wanted to take an opportunity here while we have the off season where there's not as much NHL news going on to kind of take a more of an in-depth look at what all these teams have and to give you as a fan of these teams a little bit more insight and a little bit more of a deeper look as to what's coming down the pipe for each of these teams. Now the Oilers certainly have a lot of optimism here. They have a fairly young team with some good young players like Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, just to name a few, and they have a few more players here coming up along the way as well. They had a pretty decent 2018 NHL Draft. I know their first couple selections certainly project to be NHL players, and maybe they'll have a later round steal as well. So let's jump in here. We're going to get started here with the top prospects for the Edmonton Oilers. Now, in my opinion, their absolute top prospect that is almost a guarantee to make the NHL this season is winger Kailer Yamamoto. Now, we've seen Yamamoto get an opportunity last season, get into a smaller amount of games with the Oilers as a sample. They ended up sending him back to junior, but he put up some good points, played pretty well, looked like he fit in, and personally, I can see him being the winger for Connor McDavid moving forward. He's incredibly fast. He's a smaller player, but he played in a WHL where there's a lot of big bodies, and he survived just fine, put up some great offensive numbers. So I don't think that's really a concern anymore. With today's NHL being a very fast and skilled game, we're seeing a lot more smaller players have a lot more success. It's more common nowadays, and I certainly can think he can fit into that mold here and really have a big impact on the Oilers. Now, with McDavid being so incredibly fast, I think it's important he have a line mate who can kind of keep up with him and have the same kind of offensive instincts here. And Yamamoto appears like he could be that guy. He's certainly very, very quick, so that part's not an issue. He has great offensive instincts. He's a good passer, and he can finish as well. Doesn't have the greatest big booming shot. He usually uses his stick handling and his deking ability to score a lot of goals. But between him and McDavid and their ability with their puck handling and their skating, I think more often than not, you're going to see these guys tapping the puck into an open net here more than have a big shot to rip it through. But they have some other guys here coming up, plus what's on their roster that they should have a pretty lethal power play here over the next couple of years as well. You throw in guys like Yamamoto and McDavid who are great, very speedy players with great puck handling abilities, and they have some guys that are on the team now and more on the way who can have that big booming shot from the point as well as have great passing abilities to kind of quarterback their power play here for a long time. So the Oilers appear to be in good shape, but I think Yamamoto is likely the player that has the most impact the soonest. I do fully suspect him to be in the lineup this fall here for the 18-19 season, and I do fully suspect him to stick with the club and actually get his first full NHL season here. The next prospect I want to discuss here is Edmonton Oilers prospect defenseman Ethan Bear. It was a 2015 draft selection. He's a right shot defenseman. He's around 6 feet tall, 5'11" to 6 feet, around 200 pounds, so he's not overly huge, but he is pretty solid, pretty thick guy. So obviously that's important. He's got a big booming shot. I think he has the ability here to be a power play quarterback. Ethan Bear played his junior hockey in the WHL with Seattle. He was a teammate of Matthew Barzal. Obviously, as we all know, Barzal broke onto the NHL scene here this past year as a tremendous rookie player. So he's used to playing with highly skilled forwards. Those two on the power play together clicked incredibly well, and they were, you had Bear with the big shot, you had Barzal with the creativity and the great passing and whatnot. So obviously they worked well together. So I think I can see Bear playing a similar type role with guys like Draisaitl and McDavid on the Oilers power play. He certainly projects to be a potential top 4 defenseman, and with that big booming shot has the ability to be a power play quarterback. Now, more than a big booming shot, I think he's got pretty good breakouts, and he's a decent passer as well. So he, right now, at this point in time in his career, looks like he could be a top 4 guy, at the very least be a power play quarterback. So they have a lot to be excited about in this player. I mean, he's been in their system now for a few years, and I think last year he did get a taste of the NHL. I can see him getting at least that or a little bit more this year. If you look at the Oilers roster, though, and the guys they have under contract, right now there's not a ton of room in that top 6D on the Oilers back end on the blue line to really make a ton of room for another rookie defenseman. But they're going to likely have to make some tough choices here, because it's not just Bear. They have other defensemen we're going to discuss here as well coming up that are going to deserve an NHL opportunity real soon. Sticking with defensemen here in their system, let's jump over to the 2018 first round selection that they just took here in the draft not too long ago, and that's Evan Bouchard, playing for the OHL's London Knights. He was their team captain this past season. Bouchard is another offensive dynamo here. He also has the ability to likely be a power play quarterback. He's got great vision. He's a great passer. He has a decent shot as well, but he's more of a pass first type of defenseman. I've seen many times where during a power play where he'd have the puck on the blue line and set up a great play. So he's really is a smart player. He's got great vision, great passer. Pretty decent breakouts here. Now the one knock on Bouchard is his skating. Doesn't have the best foot speed. If you compare him to other defensemen that were taken high in the draft in 2018, like a Noah Dobson and Adam Boqvist, just to name a couple, or Quinn Hughes, his skating is not near the level that they are. I mean, Quinn Hughes is arguably the best skater in the draft, in my opinion. But even if you look at guys like Boqvist and Dobson, they're certainly better skaters than Bouchard. But the good news is, I think of all the skills, skating is probably the one thing that's easiest to work on, especially with the coaches. I mean, a lot of things, like when it comes to hockey sense and vision, those things are really things you can't really teach. I mean, those are natural instincts for athletes. So personally, I think that's something that they're very fortunate that he has. He's a very gifted player in that regard. And if he can work with their developmental coaching staff to work on his skating, I think he has a really high ceiling here. So Bouchard as well could be a power play quarterback. Between what's already on the roster, you throw in Bouchard and Bear, they've got some more top four defensemen coming up here that could be power play quarterbacks. So they've a lot to be optimistic about that Oilers blue line here coming up soon. And we're not done talking about defensemen here as well. We have another one coming up that I think Oilers fans should be reasonably excited about, that has an opportunity to be a solid NHL player down the road. Now, that other defenseman we're referring to here is Caleb Jones. Now, Caleb Jones is the younger brother of NHL star defenseman Seth Jones. So obviously that family's put out some pretty solid NHL players now. And obviously, as we know, Seth Jones is developing into one of the top NHL defensemen that will likely be in a Norris Trophy conversation here for years to come. He came close this year. I believe he was 4th or 5th in voting, and I fully suspect that to continue. He's developed quite nicely into being a top pair defenseman here. Now, I'm not sure his brother's going to develop into something quite as strong as he is, but either way, he's certainly projecting at this point in time to be a pretty steady NHL defenseman. I'd be surprised if he didn't become an NHL regular here real soon. Now, like Ethan Bear, he was another 2015 draft choice. Both of these guys were drafted in later rounds, so obviously they could potentially be draft steals if they become NHL regulars here. Now, obviously Jones has pretty decent size. He's 6'1", just shy of 200 pounds, so he's got a pretty good sized body back there. Pretty good defensively as well. Like his brother, he can play a very hard-working type of game, very physical type of game as well. Not afraid to kind of throw his weight around and use his size to his advantage when it comes to clearing the net and working in the corners. He's not the most offensively gifted type of guy, but he can certainly contribute. Pretty decent with his breakout passes and things like that. Pretty good skater. So overall, he's a pretty good athlete. I think he does a lot of the little things really well. Nothing flashy, but he gets the job done. More than likely, I can see Jones probably more being a second, maybe third pair type of defenseman. I don't see his ceiling being quite as high as a Bouchard or a Bear, but he's certainly out of the three here, probably the lowest ceiling amongst those three. But I still think all three have a really excellent shot here of becoming NHL players. Like I said, if you look at what they have on the roster right now under contract for a while, they're going to have to make some tough decisions, I think, and get some room made for these guys to move up and take on bigger roles, especially with Bear as well as Jones being 2015 draft picks. I think they're getting really, really close to being ready. I likely see them getting some games this year, probably Bear more than Jones, depending on injuries and whatnot. But between this year and next year, I can see all three of these guys fighting for regular spots on the main roster. Now, we just talked about a highly skilled forward that might be able to be a winger for McDavid. We got three solid defensemen, a couple possibly being power play quarterbacks. Let's jump over back into the crease here and look at their top goaltending prospect in their system right now, and that's Stuart Skinner, who's coming from the Swift Current Broncos of the WHL. Just made a Memorial Cup appearance. Now, he was traded to Swift Current in the past year. So before that, though, we did see a case where his numbers were kind of a little bit underwhelming and a little bit on the decline. He got off to a great start in his WHL career, and then things kind of slowed down and kind of weren't going in the right direction, at least from a statistical standpoint. He gets traded to Swift Current, and his numbers picked up drastically. Goes on to the Memorial Cup. Didn't win, but they had a great showing. I know I've seen pretty well all the games of that tournament, and he did look pretty solid. I guess the one concern that could be is that obviously he's on a much better team, and his stats really improving more because of his player, or was it because of the team in front of him? And to be honest, from what I've seen as watching some of those games, I think it's a bit of both. He did seem to get more confidence having a stronger team in front of him, and I think that helped his game. But at the same time, having a stronger team in front of you, especially on the defensive side of the puck, certainly helps, because you're not going to be giving up as many grade A opportunities, which is likely going to cut down on your goals against for sure. And if the shots coming through are not as high quality, it's certainly going to help your save percentage. So I think you can make an argument there's a little bit of both, but I think we're going to see Skinner kind of go into the pro game now. His junior career is finished. He's played his 4 years in the WHL, so he'll likely obviously go into camp here with the Oilers this coming fall, see where he ends up between the East Coast or the American Hockey League, and start his development. Most goalies take a good 3 to 4 years after junior to develop into potential NHL goalies, so we'll see. He's a little bit more of a project here. I can't really pinpoint a time for sure when I'd say he'd be NHL ready. I guess it's going to depend here over how he develops once he jumps to the pro game, but easily 2 to 3 years would be my guess, but it could be a longer term. But right now he would be the top goalie prospect here in the system. Now, the next Oilers prospect I want to discuss is forward Ostaf Safin. He plays for the St. John Sea Dogs in the QMJHL. He was drafted last year in 2017, number 115th overall. Had a great year this past season in the Q, putting up 58 points in 61 games. Now, he's a player I've had a chance to see here quite a few times play in person. Obviously, the Sea Dogs are a team that's not too far from where I live, so I get a chance to see them fairly often. So he's a very talented winger, not afraid of the rough physical type of game as well. I've seen him drop the gloves a few times, so he does not shy away from that stuff at all. He's a big guy, and he's not afraid to use his size to his advantage. Safin is a type of forward who's got a very good speed. He's a very smart hockey player, very high hockey IQ. I've seen many times when I was watching him play, when he'd take a pass off the rush, go in, make some nice dekes and dangles to kind of work his way, split the D, go in, score some beautiful goals. He's got a great shot as well, got a good release. He's not afraid to use it as well. Personally, I certainly see Safin projecting here as a pretty decent NHL player, probably playing in a top 6 type of role. I think you could best describe him as kind of like a straight line player, very much a north-south type of game. Good speed, he can take off, so he can use his stick handling ability to beat the D. I've seen him score many nice goals through stick handling, and I've also seen him score many nice goals from his hard, accurate shot. So he does have a bit of it all. Like I said, he's not afraid to drop the gloves. Decent on the defensive side of the game as well. So he's a pretty well-rounded hockey player here. Like I said, he's had an opportunity to play a big role with the Sea Dogs going into next season as well. Likely going to play another year with junior, and I fully suspect he'll likely be their top player yet again. So obviously that gives him a chance to really play in a lot of situations as well, and really help his game mature and develop here. But I certainly see him projecting down the road as being a nice NHL winger for the Edmonton Oilers. Now, there's one more forward that I want to talk about here before we jump into the 2018 NHL Draft, and that's Kirill Maximov. He was another 2017 NHL Draft choice here by the Oilers. It was taking a little bit later. He was selected number 146 overall. Obviously, he's of Russian descent. He's 6'2", just shy of 200 pounds, so he's got a pretty good-sized body. Now, Kirill Maximov was a 2017 draft selection, drafted at number 146 overall, so he was a later pick. Obviously, he's of Russian descent. He's got a good size, 6'2", just shy of 200 pounds, around 194, 195. He's not afraid to use that. He certainly is not afraid of the physical game. He can certainly play with an edge as well, but he certainly has some offensive instincts as well as to boot. But he's one of those types of players. He's going to be good in the corners. He's not going to be afraid to go to the net. Like I said, he can play with some energy. He can play with some pace, and he is not afraid to use his size to his advantage. Maximov's played his junior career here with in the OHL with Niagara, and he's also had a pretty good opportunity to develop his defensive side of the game. He's been used a lot on a penalty kill as well. So for me, Maximov likely projects to be like a third-line type of player where he can have a bit of an offensive upside. Not afraid to go to the net, play good on the defensive side of the puck as well, kill penalties. He's got a wicked shot, though, got a great release. That's probably his biggest asset on the offensive side of the game, and he's not afraid to use it as well. Obviously, some players, sometimes are always told to shoot more. That's not, so far at least in his career development, not an issue with Maximov. So we'll see how he develops here, but right now at this point in time, I'd say he projects to likely be probably a third-line winger. I mean, maybe he could potentially be a second-line type of player, play on a shutdown type line, but for me, he's more of a third-line player at this point, but we'll see how his game develops here once he makes the jump to the pro game. Now let's jump in and take a look here at all their 2018 NHL draft selections. Obviously, we already spoke about their first pick, number 10 overall, Evan Bouchard. So I'm going to put a full graphic here on the screen that you can see full screen here, and we're going to take a look at the rest of their selections. Now, after Bouchard, their second selection in the draft, number 40 overall, they selected center out of the OHL, playing for Mississauga. Ryan McLeod is an excellent two-way center. I'm quite surprised he dropped as far as he did. Now, if you are familiar with a lot of prospect players, you'll be familiar here with his brother, Michael McLeod, who's an NHL drafted player to the New Jersey Devils organization. McLeod likely makes his NHL debut this coming season. They're very similar type players, very responsible, two-way guys, pretty good speed, good on face-offs, like I said, good on both sides of the puck with some offensive upside. So McLeod, I'm quite surprised he was available when they had this selection here at number 40. And he's likely going to project, I'd say probably about 2 years away. He'll probably play one more year of junior, have a chance to play a bigger role in his team this coming season. Then after that, I see him probably doing a year in the American Hockey League. And after that, hopefully being ready. So probably looking at 2 more years of development before we see McLeod in the NHL. But he's a tremendous prospect here. And personally, I think they were lucky to grab him with that number 40 selection. The number 62 selection, they grabbed one of the top goalies available here in the draft, and that's Olivier Rodrigue, playing in the QMJHL for Drummondville. So as we mentioned before, Stuart Skinner, who I kind of have pegged as their top goalie prospect at this time. Obviously, Rodrigue will jump into the organization here as well and certainly battle him for that distinction. Personally, I'd say Rodrigue's coming into the Oilers system here with a little bit more upside than Skinner, and very well in the next year or so could possibly surpass him as being the top goalie prospect. But obviously Skinner will likely have more opportunity here sooner at the pro level to see how he develops before Rodrigue comes along in another season or two. But Rodrigue very well, I think, has the potential to pass Skinner here at possibly being their top goalie prospect here in a couple of years down the road. Now, their number 164 selection, they took a defenseman, Michael Kesselring, is a high school player out of New Hampshire. So obviously they have another D back there for the prospects. And then we have their final selection, number 195, they took a center out of the Finland Junior League, Patrick Silkkonen. We see the trend continue here today. Obviously, this is the third team we've covered in this series. And if you look at the 2018 NHL Draft, there's a lot of centers and defensemen selected, way more so than wingers. So obviously they're probably by far the 2 toughest positions to fill, and you can never have too many of those guys. A lot of centers often develop into wingers as well, because not everybody can play center. There's only so many spots. So it's easier if you load up on that position, in my opinion. If you have 2 players that you're very comparable, you're not sure who to take, one's a center, one's a winger, you take the center. Or if you have a winger and a defenseman, you probably take the defenseman. Now, if you're new to the channel here, I hope you consider subscribing. We cover all 31 NHL teams, and there's plenty of content here for all hockey fans. So if you're new, hit that subscribe button. If you like this video, hit the like button as well. I'd really appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you very much for watching, everybody. We will catch you next time.